Right. Should be recording.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. This is Eric Begley and Jacob Woodland. This is our analysis of the NUMMI production method and General Motors' failure to implement the change. Next slide. We'll just go through our agenda real quick. We have our introduction, a background, evaluation of the case, proposed solutions, and our conclusion, just sort of like the paper outlines. So we'll go ahead and jump into our introduction. The NUMMI plant was a joint venture between Toyota and General Motors that was created in Fremont, California. General Motors severely mismanaged its potential for its knowledge transfer from Toyota and to help save itself from continued market share shrinking.
Yeah, I'll just go through a little bit of the background here. So GM largely dominated the market when it was first founded. At one point, it was held almost 50% of the market share in North America for automobiles. But ever since the 1950s, their market share began to slowly decline. That slow decline was mostly due to competition from foreign car makers, rising gas prices, and a change in consumer preferences to cheaper, more fuel-efficient foreign cars. The Fremont plant run by General Motors was especially bad in the GM system. It was characterized by its lackluster workforce, low quality, plenty of management issues between the union and management. And it was just known as one of the poorest plants in the GM system. As a result of all of those issues, GM decided to close the plant in 1982. But then an opportunity came up to partner with Toyota and found NUMMI. So that was started in 1984, and the Fremont, California plant was reopened to be run as a joint venture between General Motors and Toyota. Toyota's production method completely transformed the NUMMI workforce, leading to higher quality products, more efficiency. They implemented their process of Kaizen, or continuous improvement, and really empowered their workforce. And as a result, the Fremont, California plant, which surprisingly hired back most of the same workforce from the GM days, saw great improvements in product quality and efficiency across all facets of the plant. Despite NUMMI's success, General Motors failed to implement the lessons it learned at the NUMMI plant. We're going to kind of go through some of the issues with that transfer and discuss that, but eventually they were not able to curb their decline in market share, resulting in the bankruptcy in 2009.
All right, we'll go over the evaluation of the case. So one of the first things what we talked about was the psychological empowerment of the employee. They at Fremont GM, when it was GM run, the employee really had no say in the production. They couldn't stop the line. It was absolutely forbidden. They just had no control over their work environment. But in NUMMI and the Toyota way, the lowest level, the technician, was their first line of empowerment, where they just said, if there's anything that's wrong, stop the line, let's fix it, let's make any changes or updates. And those suggestions went up through management to make the line work more efficiently and have more consistent product and quality go out the door. The lack of empowerment at GM when it was run by GM was in stark contrast to how NUMMI ran things.
The second major difference between the Fremont plant when it was under GM and run by Toyota is the focus on quality present at NUMMI. In the old GM days, it was common practice, that no one could stop the line if they saw a defect on the line. Old employees recall calling over a supervisor and pointing out poor product quality and being instructed to just send it through. We'll fix it later. It was very much quantity over quality. That was completely opposite at NUMI. So NUMI completely focused on their product quality. They designed their performance metrics to emphasize product quality. They empowered their employees to stop the line and fix any defects right there instead of waiting for it to come off the line and fixing it at a later date. And the result was a much more quality product and a much more efficient production process that was able to produce quality fuel efficient vehicles.
The organizational structure at Toyota and NUMI, I think, was a little bit more flat. The way it worked was NUMI had your team and then a group leader and then your management, but it was run more by HR, and so it didn't have to go through so many layers and so much of a hierarchy as in GM to get those suggestions through. It was a little bit more nimble in that regard. It also was supported by their suppliers as well. It was not so many approvals to get it through to the supplier, so that way the supplier, if they needed to make a change for a part for Toyota or NUMI, they can do that a lot quicker. GM had a lot more siloed structure of divisions, and it was a very much throw it over the wall mentality at GM. A lot of layers, a lot of approvals, which probably met with a lot of resistance through the structure because of that.
So one of the main things that helped NUMI completely change course from the Fremont plant run under GM was a change in culture and a change in the leadership. NUMI fostered a culture of continuous improvement, how I mentioned, the process of Kaizen, continuous improvement, and that was completely supported by leadership at the NUMI production plant. One of the things that many of the employees noted when they started working at NUMI was if they had any suggestions for a new tool, something that could make the process more efficient, it was taken under consideration by the leadership and acted on right away. So that really contributed to the sense of employee empowerment as well. Not only were they empowering employees to stop the line, but their leadership actually supported it and required it. GM lacked that culture and that leadership. It was much more just come in and do your job. You're not allowed to stop the line. Management knows best type of mentality, which led to a low sense of employee empowerment and bad product quality. So that culture change and that leadership change was instrumental in transforming the NUMI plant to the efficient plant that it became under Toyota.
And last was their emphasis on teamwork at NUMI versus General Motors. General Motors, it was a very combative environment. It was almost, the union, even within the union, it was almost every man for themselves. But the union and leadership, management at Fremont were constantly at battle. It was, as one recalled, a war almost over everything. Grievances were piled up, so that way they spent more time making grievances than making cars at times. But at NUMI and the way Toyota structured it was very teamwork oriented. The organization was, you had a very low level team that worked in a section, and they rotated around doing the different tasks within that team to alleviate monotony, but also, get a sense of everybody's job was important within that team. And when somebody was out or down, the whole team suffered. And so they would try to be able to back each other up. Whereas in GM, if you got behind, you just sent the product through, and it was nobody that was there to like come help you catch up. Whereas at NUMI, the other team members could help catch you up if something fell behind. And then those little teams were like almost like little family units, and NUMI really fostered that, so that way they could really focus on their tasks, and then better make suggestions along the way and help each other out.
All right, now we're going to get into some of our proposed solutions for how GM could have effectively implemented the Toyota production method across its organization. So the first thing we came up with was they needed to overcome the issues and kind of the resistance that they face when trying to implement the method across GM. So they needed to have dedicated effort from all levels of GM, specifically management. The case mentions how, when people would come from NUMI and try and implement the NUMI production method at other GM plants, they were met with stark resistance from management and actually asked to leave in some cases. And that needed to be overcome, whether it was by removing the people that refused to change and were in this resistance to change mindset, or closing down the plants and showing everyone they were serious. But ultimately, how they tried to do it just didn't work because they met too much resistance throughout the rest of the GM. The reason they met so much resistance was they had this resistance to change mindset. They had a very fixed mindset. They did not have good receptiveness to the changes that were being brought in. So GM needed to find a way to foster a different mindset within its management system, one that was more receptive to change, whether that be remove entrenched leadership who didn't want to change because they said this is the way we've always done it, or more training, sending more people to Japan to study at the Toyota plants and kind of see the benefits of the production method. They needed to find a way to push these people out of the fixed mindset that they were in. And then the third thing we came up with was they needed to change their metrics. One of the reasons that everybody understood the importance of product quality at NUMI is because they had all of their espoused values and their metrics tracking quality. That's what they wanted to emphasize. So GM needed to find a way to change their performance metrics to encourage the behavior they wanted to see. They wanted to see less quality defects, so they needed to change their metrics to something more like NUMI, which had a metric number of defects per 100 cars. So our suggestion would be to implement those quality metrics to encourage the behavior you want to see within the employees, emphasizing product quality over quantity.
Two more were we suggested that the organizational culture and structure needed to change to be a little bit more flatter within GM to allow less time between approvals of any suggestions. As I noted earlier, there was just too many hierarchy managers to go through for any suggested changes, and you could meet more resistance along the way. If it was a little bit flatter, you could be a little bit more nimble in that way. And then also, empower that culture of change to within the GM organization, where it was, the change is okay. We need to make these different changes, empower our team members to make the changes, and and leadership needed to be a little bit more reactive and you know, uh, and enforce those changes by by showing them themselves and making the changes where needed and saying these are the ways that we need to go. But one of the best ways we thought was they needed to have a more effective change process. You know, most likely adopt Cotter's 8-step organizational change process. This one, if they would have been able to adopt more of a better change process, probably would have incorporated a lot of the other suggestions along the way, and been able to meet less resistance, and or overcome that resistance, have a little bit, more of a teamwork effort along the way. But so if they would have a better change process within the organization, it would have created some urgency, had better communication along the way, empowered everybody, and have those new approaches anchored within the company culture.
So the conclusion, so the new meat plant exemplifies the success that was possible through the employee focused approach when you empower the frontline workers. When you have a company culture that emphasizes quality over quantity, you have strong leadership in place to support the frontline workers, and you have the appropriate organizational structure and a teamwork mentality. Those are all things that were present at the new meat plant that really set it apart from General Motors. General Motors had the opportunity to stop their decline in market share into bankruptcy in 2009 by adopting these practices, making their production process more efficient and making them a better quality product. But ultimately, they were not able to do that due to the resistance they met when trying to implement the process across the organization. In order to make that transition go more positively, General Motors should have increased their training, sent more people to Japan to train with Toyota and at NUMMI, remove the barriers to change present with the entrenched leadership who are in the fixed mindset, changing their company metrics to emphasize quality over quantity, restructuring to flatten out their organizational structure so they can better support line workers, and act on their suggestions for process improvements, and implementing an effective change process, which would have helped implement all of the other points we mentioned there, and effectively change the company culture to be more efficient and more quality focused. Despite the issues in the past implementing the production process, GM can still learn lessons from this case, and improve its future product quality and efficiency with some of the lessons we've highlighted here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time for listening to this presentation. It's been our pleasure.